can join whenever they do, and can get caught up afterwards if they need to. Okay, so good morning again, everyone, and thanks for joining. For those of you who I haven't yet met virtually, my name is Elise, and I'm the partner manager here at EzzyBills. So I do a lot of the sales and marketing work for the organization, and I'm really excited to be here today sharing a little bit more about approval workflows. And I think approval workflows are really important and really interesting because it's not necessarily why a lot of our customers find EzzyBills originally, but definitely a massive, massive benefit to all of our clients that are using them. So most people find us obviously because of data extraction from invoices. And once they're happy with how all the data is being extracted from their invoices and being processed through to their accounting software, often people start asking us about approval workflows. And one of the benefits of our approval workflows is that they're integrated into your existing workflow. And so our approvals are actually done before the export into Xero. And so basically what will happen is someone will send their invoice through to EzzyBills, and then instead of it being exported directly into Xero, it'll get sent through to the approvers. And what we are going to do today is just go through a couple of different cases. And so for those of you who joined our webinar last month on expenses and spend money transactions and employee expense claims, it's going to be a similar style of webinar where we'll go through 3 different sort of case studies. And in each of those case studies, there's a little bit of a story around it. And then we'll go through in the software how to actually set up that workflow. Now, I'm sure you realize that it goes without saying that there's lots of features and lots of functionality, and impossible to cover all of it. So our team is definitely available. First of all, at the end of this webinar, we are available to answer questions about anything we've spoken about in the webinar, as well as anything else that you've got questions about relating to approvals or the product in general. And then we're also happy to help you afterwards. If you'd like a little bit more help setting up some custom workflows for your team, we are definitely happy to help step you through that. Okay, just a quick question. Is there access links to previous webinars? Yes, so all of our webinars are on our YouTube channel. So if you just go to EzzyBills on YouTube, you'll be able to find all of our previous webinars. And if you can't find them or there's a specific one that you're looking for, just send us an email to support and we'd be happy to help you. And we will be sending out this webinar probably tomorrow to all of you who are attending, and also everyone who signed up and wasn't able to attend. So I guess that's also just a quick note for future, that if you ever see a webinar that you're interested in, but you're not able to make it at the time that we're running it, just sign up anyway. And we always send out the links the next day, so you can always watch it at that point. Okay, so I think we're gonna jump in. So here are the 3 case studies that we're gonna talk about today. So the first one is a small cafe and a case where we're going to just look at a single level approval, quite a simple workflow. The second one, we'll look at a large marketing agency that has 2 levels of approval, and also has some tracking involved in that approval. And then the third case we're going to look at is a not-for-profit that requires 3 levels approval, and that will depend on the amount of the invoice. Now, just a quick note is that we actually do have up to 5 levels of approval available now. We've just built functionality for a 5th level of approval with a not-for-profit client that I've been working with. So we can do up to 5 levels of approval. I think we'll probably just show you 3 today, but I'll mention how to do the 4th and the 5th as well. Also just wanted to say hi to my colleague Michael, who's joined us on the webinar and will be available to help answer any questions throughout the webinar and definitely at the end. Okay, so let's jump in. Case 1, small cafe. You run a small cafe with one manager who is on site managing the daily operations of the business. You want to make sure that she approves all of the supplier invoices before they are paid, because she sees what items are being received on a daily basis and can check if something was incorrect. So this is probably the most simple case of approvals in EzzyBills, and that's really a case where all of the invoices go through a single person, and it's just one level of approval. So we'll show you how to do that. So we'll jump into our EzzyBills dashboard, and we'll go into the settings menu. And in the second tab of the settings menu, we've got this approval and expenses tab. And all we've got to do is click on enable approval workflow, single level approver, and then put in the default approver. So in the case of the story that I was just talking about with the cafe, you'd put the email address of the cafe manager that needs to be approving the invoices. I've created a new email address just for our demo today, which is just ezzybillapproval@gmail.com. So all you've got to do again is click the enable approval workflow, click on the single level approver, put in the default approver email there, and hit save settings. Now, this is probably a good time to mention about the concept of active and inactive workflows in EzzyBills. And so there's two different types of workflows we have. One is an active workflow, and basically if a workflow is active, then that is the default for EzzyBills. And so anything that's sent through to your regular EzzyBills email address, so in my case, it would be yourcompany@ezzybillswine.com, goes through that active workflow. Now, if it's not an active workflow, it's a workflow that you've created and built, but in order for it to be used, then the document needs to be sent through specifically to that workflow, to that email address. And I'll show you in a few minutes when we get to the next case study what that actually means. So for now, we've got our enable approval workflow, we've got our default approver email, and that's pretty much it. So I'll just run a document and just show you what that approval process looks like. So we'll just grab an invoice. We'll use a food invoice because it's a cafe. And we will send that invoice again to the main email address of the account, which is yourcompany@ezzybillswine.com. Attach the document and just send it through. So in that sense, this most simple workflow is really the same as the normal process that you would use to get documents from the outside world into your accounting software. You can email them, you can drag and drop them, you can select them, and you could also use the mobile app. So as you can see, that document has sort of come through on the screen, and what's going to happen is that instead of it being exported straight to zero, like the documents do when you don't have an approval workflow set up, what's going to happen in a few seconds is it will see that it will send me an email for approval. And I'll show you what that looks like in a few seconds when it comes through. So like you can see when you hover over the tile, it gives you a little bit of a status update of where it is at. And sometimes I find it's just a little bit easier if you need to refresh the page. Just a general note about EzzyBills, I'm uploading one document at a time because that's what I'm doing for the purposes of the demo. But if you're using the software to upload all of your documents, there's no need to do them one at a time. So if the documents are taking a few extra seconds, there's no need to upload one and wait for it to load and then continue with the next one. You can upload as many as you like at the same time and have them all process simultaneously. So I'll just give that another couple of seconds. Usually documents take about 30 to 45 seconds to process. Sometimes they take slightly longer. It really just depends on the day and the internet. And like we saw when everybody joined in the morning, how many people are in lockdown and working from home, in terms of how that impacts the internet speeds. So while that's just finishing, I'm just going to mention something else. So in this setting, we did a single level approval, but I also just wanted to mention that you can do a 2-level approval in the exact same way. So if you've got a workflow where all of the bills from your cafe in this case, or any type of business, need to be approved by the same 2 people, you would just click on the 2-level approver, and then you would just input the email address of the 2nd-level approver. And as you'll see in some of the other workflows that we discuss in a few minutes, once the first person has approved the document, there'll be an automatic email sent to the next person. So you'll upload the document, there'll be an automatic email to the first approver. The first approver will approve it, and then there'll be an automatic email sent to the second one. Now, if the first approver doesn't approve it, then there won't be an email sent to the second person, and the document will come up on your dashboard as failed. And then you'll have to go and figure out, what happened and why it was not approved, and how we can fix that problem for the future. Okay, so when we go back to our dashboard now, the tile has turned gray, which usually means that it's waiting approval, and it says waiting approval from EzzyBillsApproval@gmail.com. So we'll go into that email address, and we see we've got an email waiting. So this is what our approval emails look like. Now, approvals in EzzyBills are pretty much always done through email. So the approver gets this kind of email. There's a bar across the top saying waiting approval. You can see an image of the document. And if you click on this view document button, then you can see the whole document and all of the line items in detail. At the bottom, you've got some information about the supplier, the invoice, the date, the total, and the tax. And then a few different options. So obviously the most common one is approve. You can also reject it. You could also say that it's not for you. You can add a note, or you can modify it. Now, if you add a note, that note will go into your accounting software along with the document. And if you click on not for me, it'll give you one of 2 options. So if you know who the document's meant to be for, then you can click on that other person. And again, this is based on the approvers that are set up in the approver table in your settings menu. Or you can click on a different approver. So you could say it's hello@ezzydoc.com. Or you could just leave that blank, and it'll just go back through the dashboard. Okay, does the approver need to be an EzzyBills user? So we don't really have a concept of users in EzzyBills. You can have anybody be an approver. All you have to do is put their email address into that box that I showed you, and they don't need to have any other access to logging into EzzyBills or using EzzyBills. You can just pop their email address there, and they'll be able to approve the documents. So we're just gonna approve that. We get a nice little message saying the document has been approved. And then when we go back to our dashboard, we should see it'll take another few seconds, and the document should be approved. Just going back to that question about the users, EzzyBills doesn't limit the number of users that we have in our system in any way. So you could have as many people from your staff or contractors or employees or clients logged into the EzzyBills account at the same time. We don't really put a limit on that, and you can also have as many people as you want using the mobile app at the same time. So from our perspective, we primarily care about the number of documents that you're processing, and we don't really care as much about how many people are actually using the software from a sort of cost and structural perspective. Okay, so we've seen that this tile has turned dark green and the document's been successfully exported. So I'm just gonna take you to 0. We can see this document's been exported, which is great. We've got the account codes that have come through, which is great. And the other thing I'm going to show you is, alongside with an image of the document, we also have this watermark at the top of the document. So you can see here it says approved, EzzyBillsApproval@gmail.com. And if you had multiple approvers, then they would all be listed there. And so that's another feature of the approval process, that you really can use it as a bit of an audit trail if you have any issues later on, if you need to go back and remind yourself of who approved the document, or you've got auditors that need to go back and make sure that things have been approved at the relevant times in the relevant ways, then that is something that you can do. Okay. Can I divert different invoices to different approvers after it's downloaded to EzzyBills? So the answer to that is no, because the way that our approval is done is that it's done before it goes through to EzzyBills. So I'll show you a couple of different ways of setting up workflows right now that are a little bit more complex than the one I just did. So the one I just showed you, like I said, would be a case that all of the documents are going through to the same person or same people. In a lot of situations, that's not the case. So I'll show you how to do it if they're going to different people and what that looks like. So any invoice can be sent to any email address for approval. Yes, but it's got to be programmed into the system. But yes, there are ways of doing that with different workflows, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Okay, so I think we will jump back to our next case study. Okay, so now we have our marketing agency. Okay, your bookkeeping client runs a large marketing agency that includes a number of different departments. The expenses for each department need to be tracked, and the employee needs to review their bills and assign a GL code to them, and then their manager needs to approve the expense. So I've had this case come up with a couple of clients I've been working a little bit more closely with in the past couple of weeks, where they actually want a 2-step approval process, but where the first approver is actually the employee themselves who submitted the expense. And the reason for that is A, they want the employee to review the expense, but B, because it's only the employee themselves who knows which GL code to assign to the invoice, and in some cases, which tracking data to assign to the invoice. And so I'll show you how to do an approval process now that's going to be a multi-step approval, so how to set up a 2-level approval with the workflow, and second of all, how to allow employees to actually assign the GL code to the invoice. So we're going to jump back to our EzzyBills dashboard. And this time, instead of going to the settings menu, we're going to go to the workflow menu. And this is where we can set up a lot of the more sort of complicated workflows that we've got in EzzyBills. So what we're going to do in this case is we want a 2-level approval, where, like I said, it's the employee first and then a manager. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to EzzyBills approve level 2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a new workflow, copy EzzyBills approve level 2, and then create the workflow. So you always want to create a new workflow because the workflows that are in the system sort of can't be modified and changed. So we always want to create new workflows. And then what you want to do is rename it so that you know which workflow is associated with which thing. So in this case, we're talking about our marketing agency. So we will call this workflow. Let's just call it marketing agency demo, and we'll save that. And then what we've got here is sorry about that, is the 2-level workflow for our marketing agency. Okay, so now within this workflow, there's a few different tasks, but the one that's the most relevant for how we're going to modify these different workflows is the submit approval. So when you click on that submit approval, you get a number of different approval rules. And these approval rules will basically help us define who needs to approve what invoices under what conditions and why and when and how. So you can take a quick look at them. I'll just mention a couple of the most popular ones. So if the invoice amount is over a certain amount, then send for approval. If the invoice amount is over a certain amount, then a certain person will approve the invoice. If the invoice amount is less than a certain amount, then someone will approve the invoice if it's recurring, if it comes from a certain supplier, if it doesn't come from a certain supplier. If a certain approver approved the invoice, then the next approver will be another person. The default approver, if the amount is between a certain amount, and then skip an approver if they've already approved the invoice. And so we'll go through a couple of these in more detail, and I'll use them, and then obviously let us know if you've got specific questions. So in this case, we want the employee to be the default approver. And so we're going to click default approver, and then we're going to put in the employee's email address, which again, we'll use the same email address that we used before, EzzyBillsApproval@gmail.com. Obviously, it can be any employee and they can have any email address. This is just the one that I've set up for the demo. So we're going to have the employee themselves approve the invoice. And then for the second level approver, we are going to say, just for argument's sake, if the invoice amount is over $50, then send for approval. And if the invoice amount is over $50, then Elise at EzzyDoc will approve the invoice. So in order to set up a workflow with an amount, you need 2 rules. So you have to say if the invoice amount is over a certain amount, then send for approval. And then if the invoice is over a certain amount, you're going to click the person who will approve the invoice, and then save settings. Okay, now what we're going to do now, because this is not an active workflow, instead of just sending it through to the regular EzzyBills account, we actually have a unique email address that's been generated to run this workflow. So it'll be, in this case, yourcompany.workflow.marketingagency.demo.ezzybills1.com. So the first part is the name of the EzzyBills account. The second part is always just workflow. And then the third part is the name of this specific workflow that we've created. So we will take that, we will pop it in an email, and I think we will use that same food invoice again, and we will send that through. Okay. Now we will take some questions while that's processing. What happens if the amount is inconsistent? Can you elaborate what you mean on that, Elise? In the workflow lines where I type 50. So you're talking about a case where sometimes the approver would have to approve it if it's $50, and sometimes they'd have to approve it if it's $100, or it would just be a case that the approver approves it no matter what the amount. So I think I'll just answer both questions. So you don't have to put an amount. So if you want the approver to approve the document, whether it's $1 or whether it's $20,000, it's not an issue, and you don't need to specify amount. If I said with the first option and then the second line, yeah, so that's totally fine. So we have that's why we have multi levels of approval. And the third case that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, with sort of a case study of a not-for-profit, you can definitely do that. So in the same level of approval, you can't specify different amounts, but in different levels of approval you can. So you can say, it only goes to the first approver if it's over 50, it only goes to the second approver if it's only 200, and only goes to the third approver if it's only 2,000, and so on and so on. So you can definitely do that. Okay, and like we can see, again, we've got an email sent through. Now, one of the things that makes this case study a little bit different is that I mentioned that it's the employee themselves that's looking at the document, and they themselves need to set the tracking data on the invoice and the GL codes. And so basically what we see this time is the same thing that we've seen before, but I'm going to point out another button that we didn't really talk about in the past, which is modify. So if you click that modify button, it gives you a few things. So first of all, it gives you the document in a little bit of a bigger kind of image. But the more important thing that it does is that it allows you to set the account code and the tracking, and also the PO if it's relevant. So let's say in this case that the GL code associated with this is, we're an accounting company, so let's say this food invoice is entertainment because they've bought all this food for a staff party. And the tracking is East Side. Now, this tracking and GL code integrates totally with whatever you've got in your accounting software, in your Xero, MyOb, or QuickBooks. So for me, I've just got the default sort of tracking, but if you put in your Xero, the names of your departments, the names of your locations, any kind of tracking data that you've got in your Xero will come across to this, and the person who's approving this invoice at this stage will be able to set the tracking and the GL code. Okay, good question. That appears to set the GL code and tracking to the same for the entire invoice. Is it possible to split the codes per line? Okay, so it's a really good question. The short answer is yes and no. So it can't be done at this level. It's got to be done once the document's exported to Xero. So here you can only set one code for the invoice, but then once it goes through to Xero or through to your other accounting software, whatever accounting software you're using, then there's the ability to update or change any of the line items that don't fit with that default code. Okay, can you filter the GL codes to limit it to EzzyBills? I'm not sure I understand the question. Okay, I'm going to keep going, and Janina, if you can just clarify, that would be great. Okay, so you can you set the GL codes, you set your tracking, we're all ready to go, and we can approve that document. And we will just let that go through. Can you limit the expense codes? I don't think so. I think that just pulls all of the codes that you've got from zero, and then you just choose from that list that's in zero.
Yeah, in terms of, so this is Michael, I'll just follow up on that, Elise. In terms of account coding, the way it normally works is you don't bother setting the account codes during approval. If you've got a multi-line, say, food invoice, and you want it to code a certain way, then the way EzzyBills works is we look at the invoice history. We also look at any settings you might have set at a supplier level in Xero or MyOb. And so we use that information. So if there's a line which is being coded a certain way in the past, then we'll automatically code it that way. So during approval, setting account codes is basically overriding that normal behavior. So if you want everything to be coded a certain way, you can set it during approval. Otherwise, we'll just automatically code it based on the history. In terms of what shows up, the list is generally anything that can be used in a bill. So, or a sale invoice. So pretty much all the account codes will be available in that list.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, great. Okay, so this is just processing through. And once it goes through, I'll just show you those account codes and tracking in Xero. There is another way to set those tracking codes in the workflows that I'm probably not going to go into more detail on, but those tracking categories also can be set in the workflows. So for example, if you've got an approval workflow for your marketing department where the marketing associate needs to approve it, and then the marketing director needs to approve it, and you want the tracking for that invoice to say marketing on it, we've got a workflow task called set invoice details, and basically you can pop that workflow task into your workflow, and that will also set the tracking for that.
Yeah, and Elise, I wanted to mention one more thing. Can you go to the workflow page? So where you mentioned in the top there, where you can have a different email upload for each workflow. So you see where you got your name.workflow. So that's the email you would send. You'd send an email to that workflow if you wanted to upload a bill to that workflow. So if you wanted that approval workflow, you'd upload to that. You can also send it via your mobile phone as well. The name next to it, the workflow.test, that would be the alias you would put into your settings on your phone. So if you wanted to capture a receipt and you wanted to go on a particular workflow, in this case, an approval workflow, you would put that in your alias, and that would have that effect.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, I guess that's something important to mention, because that's some newer functionality that's been built recently, that the mobile app really has almost all, if not all, the same functionality as working from the dashboard. So that gives you a lot more flexibility if you've got staff or contractors or people sort of out in the field that are doing this through their mobile app. They can upload to the various workflows just as easily as it is to do by email. Okay, so let's see. So I think while that document is in progress, I think we'll start with the next case study and jump back to that document when it has been processed. Okay, Case 3, medium-sized not-for-profit. You're the CFO of a government-funded not-for-profit organization that is doing research to help prevent and treat common diseases. With your strict funding and reporting guidelines, each invoice has to be approved by up to 3 people, depending on the amount of the invoice. So this is something that we're seeing increasingly, especially with our not-for-profit clients, that there's multiple levels of approval, especially for organizations that receive government funding and have very strict kind of reporting requirements. This is really becoming increasingly necessary, really, in order for the organizations to function effectively. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our workflow. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new workflow. And again, we'll start with the EzzyBills approve level 2, because that's the workflow that we're starting with, and we'll rename it to not-for-profit. And then what we need to do for the 3rd level approval and 4th and 5th, if we want to do that, is we actually need to add the workflow tasks in. And so for each level of approval, we need to have a submit approval and then approved, and a submit approval and then approved. So we've got the level 1 submit approval and approved, the level 2 submit approval and approved. So now we can go into this search and we can get a submit approval 3, and we've got that box there, and then we'll have an approved 3. And then we've got an approved 3, and basically, sorry, and then approved doesn't need to be here. Okay, and then basically what we need to do is we need to connect those boxes into our general workflow. So you can just go to the middle of the box, you get that dot, you create a line. And I find the trick with this is really just going from the middle of the box to the middle of the box. Usually you can create those lines. And then once you've got that, you can hit save. And if the workflow is not done properly, it usually won't save. And so that's a good way of knowing whether or not it's actually been set up properly. And then now you can see, I know it's really small, but we've got submit approval 1 approved, submit approval 2 approved, submit approval 3 approved. And then we've got our 0 export at the end. And then what we do here, like I've done for a few different not-for-profits that I've been working with recently, is you hit on the submit approval. Now let's say for this case, the first level approval is done no matter what the amount is. So we'll say, here we've got the default approver is EzzyBillsApproval@gmail.com. And then we save that. Then we can say the 2nd level approval only needs to be done if the amount is over $5,000. And then we'll say Elise at EzzyDoc.com will approve that one. Sorry, 1 second. That was just if the invoice is over 5,000. And then send for approval. And then if invoice amount is over 5,000, then Elise at EzzyDoc will approve the invoice. And then we save the settings on that. And then we've got our submit approval 3. And here we'll say if the invoice amount is over $20,000, then send for approval. And if the invoice amount is over $20,000, then let's just say Michael at EzzyDoc will approve the invoice. We're not going to actually run this one, but just to give you guys an idea of how you do it, that's basically what you would do. And you would have the same thing again if you continued to submit approval 4 or submit approval 5. You would just add those additional boxes. So you would go here and you would do submit approval for. So you'd add that submit approval for box to the workflow, and then the approved for work, and then the approved for, and then the submit approval 5 and the approved 5 if you needed it. And then it would be the exact same for each of those different ones, that you would just click on the submit approval, set the approval rules for each of those, and then run your invoice at the end. So I'm not going to run that one because we've sort of seen the process of what the documents look like when they go through. But that one, I really just wanted to focus on what that workflow looks like and how you set it up and how you create additional boxes in the workflow that are not necessarily part of the default one. So I think we'll go back to our dashboard now. Right, and we've got a level 2 approval that needs to be done. And so here you can see it actually says on the invoice waiting level 2 approval. And so the approver knows that the first person has already approved the invoice. They're the second approver. Other than that, they've got basically the same information, and they can see who has approved the document in the past. So they can approve it. And then once that goes through, then the document will process and be exported to Xero or your accounting software. Okay, I have some clients who prefer to batch their invoices for approval rather than having one come through. Can you set an approval process to send 1 email per day to an approver batching all of the invoice upload at that day? So we don't have that functionality. Unfortunately, they are all done through email. If you've got one person that's approving all of the invoices, they can be done through the dashboard. So I know some clients, if there's, like I said, one person that's approving all of the invoices or the majority of the invoices, what you can do is you can go into the dashboard, into this search approve button, and you can click on the waiting for approval, which I don't have any documents waiting for approval now, but if I did have documents waiting for approval, I would see all of them here, and then there'd be the ability to actually approve them from the dashboard. So again,
Elise, you can do that through batching. You can batch them together. So when, if you go into waiting approval, like you said, and there's 10 emails waiting approval or 10 invoices, then you can select all of them and then send them to a particular person for approval. So they would go as a single email to that person where they could approve them as a batch. So imagine a scenario where you've got, say, multiple approvals. On the first level, you don't set a particular email address. So they would come into EzzyBills. They would be sitting in here waiting approval. You might select 3 of them, and then you would send them to, say, Elise for approval. Elise will get an email which has those 3 bills for approval. There'll be 3 buttons, and she'll be able to go through and approve each of them as a batch. They're all in the same email.
Amazing. So I'm just going to go back and just point out something that Michael said. So what he was talking about is here in the beginning, when you enable the approval workflow, you wouldn't put a default approver in there. And then basically what EzzyBills does is if there's no default approver, then it'll come to the dashboard, like Michael said, and then you could trigger an email to be sent. Okay. Let's see if that document has gone through. Great. So that document has gone through. And now we can go into Xero, and like you can see, the account code came through as entertainment and the region came through as East Side. So that's the tracking and the GL codes that were set during the approval process. So we can see that that information has all come through, which is great. Okay, more questions. When the approver receives the email, can the subject of the email mention the supplier name or invoice number rather than the generic EzzyBills email approval. Michael, is that possible?
So can you read that again? I didn't.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. When the approver receives the email, can the subject of the email mention the supplier name or invoice number rather than a generic EzzyBills email approval?
So when when you're sending through the email to approval, so Elise, can you go into search approve? And probably while I'm waiting, why don't you do this? Why don't you just remove the default approver and just upload a bill to it, and I'll explain what's going to happen. So when the bill comes into EzzyBills, it'll be sitting in EzzyBills waiting for approval. And if there's no default approver, it would be sitting waiting for you to choose who to approve it. At that time, you can type in anything into the subject. You can also put in anything into the body of the email, and that email will have that subject and body when it gets sent to the approver. So if you wanted to tell the approver that you should set the account code, or this is for this job, or something like that, then you'd be able to do that. Having said that, the supplier name and the invoice number, they're going to be on the approval email anyway. We're going to extract that information and put that in the actual approver email anyway. So it'll probably be other information. So yeah, Elise, if you can go into, say, search approve, waiting approval. Okay, it's not come through yet.
Okay, let's go through to the next question. We'll come back to this one in a minute when it's processed. If more than one invoice is sent for approval as a batch, it went down as each one on the email. It would be better if possible to see as a list on the email so that the approver would not miss any invoices. Okay, I think that's more of a comment. Thank you.
Oh yeah, so this is one of the things that we are working on now, actually. So when we send out an email, an approver email to someone, the email currently has the approval, the invoice waiting approval. So it might be one, or if you've sent a batch, there might be multiple. What there's also going to be is a link, and we're going to add a link underneath this one or multiple approvals. We're going to add a link where you can click on that and you'll be able to see all the invoices waiting approval. So for example, if you've received a few approval emails and you haven't approved them, and then you can just click on that link and it'll show you a list of all of the invoices waiting approval, and you would be able to go through and effectively process them all as a batch. So you might do all your approvals on a Friday, you ignored them as they came through on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and Thursday. Then on Friday, you just click on the link. It'll show you all the emails queued up, or invoices, sorry, queued up, waiting approval, and you can just go through and approve them all. So that functionality will be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to go back to this other invoice that we ran. Not sure, Michael, what you want to do.
Oh yeah, so just select it. Just select it. So what we're going to do is basically send it to someone for approval. So we click on email approval now at the top. And at this point, we can put in the subject. So we can put in anything we want. We can also edit the body of the email. So you can edit the body of the email as well. So you can just type in at the bottom or at the top or anywhere you want. I wouldn't normally change that, but it's okay too. It doesn't matter. You can type whatever you want there. But yeah, this basically allows you to edit and add whatever you want. And if you send that, then it'll just go through like that. So that's what point I was trying to make. So you just hit the send button. It'll go through with the oh, you need to choose the approver.
You need an approver, yeah. It's been sent. Amazing. Great. Okay, any more questions? I think we're basically to our questions part of the webinar. I know people have been asking some great questions throughout, but we've got a few minutes left now for any final questions. Cool function, great. Okay, and we've had some people just message that they'll get in touch with us privately about client-specific questions, which is great. You're definitely welcome to get in touch with us with any client-specific questions, obviously, that you don't want to ask in a public forum. That's not a problem. Can we receive a recorded webinar? Yeah, so I will send out the recorded webinar to everyone who attended and to everyone who signed up for the webinar and couldn't attend. Usually it takes about a day just until it's sort of uploaded and edited, but yeah, it's not a problem. We'll send it out to everyone who attended, and you're welcome to share it with anyone that you'd like to share it with. Okay. Any final questions? Michael, any final thoughts? Anything?
No, I think you did a pretty good job, Elise. I think we covered it all.
Okay, amazing. So just want to say thank you again to everyone for joining. Like I've mentioned a few times, you're welcome to reach out to us. I'm happy to answer questions. You can reach out to our support team who are happy to help, happy to answer general questions, and also happy to answer more specific questions and help you get your workflows set up if that's something that you are interested in doing. So thanks again for coming, and have a great afternoon. I think those final questions are just thank yous, which is great.
Okay. Thanks, Elise.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.